Hey guys, Dr. Snellgrove here, just recording a quick video. This is continuing chapter 12, resumes and job applications for our tech writing class. And this is focusing specifically on where we start on page 340 about writing your resume. And of course, that is tied to our resume writing assignment. So, all the chapters of the book are pretty important, but this is maybe a bit more important than some of them because it directly correlates to one of your major projects. All right. And so some of you, everyone comes in this class with different levels of experience. Some of you have, maybe written a lot of resumes. You may be like, I mostly got this, Dr. Snellgrove. Come on now. Other people might never have done a resume. So we're just going to take it from the top. It's a kind of a short section of the book, plenty of examples, as always, can really help you out if you're having trouble. So let's dive in. All right. So they talk about the making the resume concise, easy to read, correcting grammar, spelling, all that. I did want to emphasize concise. I don't know if anybody was curious, like our assignment asked you to put the resume on 1 to 2 pages with one being preferable. And sometimes it feels paradoxical. Like, I've got all this experience. It's like, yeah, but there's only so much attention span the people that are actually going to be getting this stuff can pay to it. Right. So it's like you don't want to be, here's my 5-page resume. And the guy next, your competition is turning in a 1-page resume. Well, they're probably going to favor the 1-page resume because it's easy to read and skim. Anyway, they recommend keeping everything in a single column. We talked about this, I think, in the last video. Single column is easier to read for everyone, but especially those people who have limited vision. And maybe more importantly, in this day and age, the single column, it's easy for the AI screening devices. When you are applying, it's going to try to read through. We talked before about how you want to have those keywords in when you're applying for jobs. So it makes it easier for the AI to scan when you have everything. It recommends using a 12-point type of something like Arial or Times New Roman, Calibri, something like that for major headings, and then a 10-point type for minor headings, and then a 10-point of a different font for the text. So basically, you want to have your headers be bigger, but not that much bigger than your regular text, and you want to have your text itself be in a slightly different font than your headers. So for instance, if the headers are in Arial, you might have the text in Times New Roman, right? Okay, so, but it's really up to you. Like there are, by the way, I guess I should come clean with this. I'm fine if you use like some devices to help you make a resume. One, I don't know exactly how I'd check up on that, even if I wanted to track down on you, but this is part of that writing for the real world. I don't just want you to have a resume that you can turn in for an assignment, like get an easy grade or something. But hey, here's a resume you can turn right around, maybe get a good summer job or land the job you dream. So anyways, we talked about single column format. We talked about the fonts to use. What brought that to my mind was there are certain like resume makers that would actually use the header format instead of just putting it in a slightly bigger thing. So that's not the end of the world if you want to use that. Anyway, chronological resume. So it's saying that most resumes are in reverse chronological order, which is, of course, you start with the most recent job you have done. Maybe it's a current job or a job you recently left, and then you kind of go backwards in order. And there's a few advantages to that, but arguably the main advantage is, typically as you get older, you get more experience. Like, all right, the job I'm applying for now is kind of directly related to what I've been doing. Like, hey, I've spent a few years doing this. I'm ready to maybe move into a management position in that same sector, right? Okay, well, if that's the case, it's like a reverse chronological order. They're going to see your most relevant experience first, and then by the time it gets to like, I swept up the general store when I was in high school or something like that, it's like, okay, they're already convinced. Versus if you started out like, I swept, it can be difficult to convince them that you're a great hire, right? Now, with that being said, it's not the only way to organize your resumes. There's functional order, which we're going to get into later. So anyway, right now we'll move on. What else are you putting in here aside from your job experience? Putting in educational information before the work experience, although it points out that this can be sort of a dealer's choice for you. Younger applicants, college students, or recent graduates, they typically put the education information first for a few reasons. One, there might be some, some stuff that's related to that. Like I went to this prestigious school, but of course, the other thing is they might have more educational experience and employment experience, so they want to put that first and foremost. Versus someone like me that's been working for what feels like forever. And so it's like, okay, I've got a lot more work experience than I have education. I got a lot more education than the average bear. But for me, the education stuff would be way down on the resume instead of very prominent. Okay. It's talking about like listing colleges or universities, usually not listing your high school, and it's also putting in, or this is also in the reverse chronological order. So it'd be like, here's a university applicant might have, here's the university I graduated from, but then here is the, community college I went to before that. Just putting that in the reverse order, giving the major, what you majored in, the date or expected date of graduation. It says don't list courses because you're gonna find out real quick. It takes up that one page on a resume, goes really quickly. But you can list things like honors, special projects that you completed. Y'all get the idea. What is it that highlights what a good worker you are? They don't necessarily want to know. I took social problems in 2022, but if you were like, on the dean's list every year or something, the president's list, I don't know, stuff like that, special honorifics, anything that might help show that you stood out. Okay, so we talked about putting the work in a reverse chronological order. What they recommend here, and I joined them in this recommendation, is actually minimizing your use of the word I. It's not because you're not supposed to use it. You're not like forbidden from having that on your resume. But if you're not careful, it's like, what'd you do here? I did this. What'd you do here? I did this. And so it's like repetitive phrases throughout. So they suggest basically you can use incomplete sentences, just giving fragment descriptions if you need to of what you did before, descriptive phrases rather than complete sentences. Emphasize the experiences that make you the right candidate for the job in question. So again, all of this is like you want to customize resumes and job applications whenever you can. You don't want to put out the vibe that you're just sending everyone that might be hiring the same stuff. Like, all right, I have made a special resume for my application to this place that is, paying special attention to the XYZ job I have done and the, ABC educational experience I have that makes me the ideal candidate for that. And then they point out that, like, especially because space is at such a premium, some jobs are going to get less emphasis than others. I joked about I swept up, the general store in high school. Doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't put that on your resume, but don't devote a whole lot of time to it. But if you were the project manager at a Fortune 500 company, that kind of stuff would normally get more emphasis, both because it's considered more important. I guess that's debatable, and also because that's probably where your relevant stuff is, like we talked about earlier. Like, hey, I learned that these things on this job. That's why I'm applying to that job. Points out if you have military experience, you can put it on there. Among the job experiences, you can give the highest rank that you had, and describe the duties that you completed, et cetera, et cetera. All right, and then it points out here, and this is kind of a subject in debate among the people that the hiring managers, I guess you might say, including personal information if you think it's going to make you desirable for this job, otherwise leave it out. So here's a wild example. The book points out, I think, like, hey, you could point out that I feel like we've talked about this actually in a previous video, but you could point out something like, hey, I regularly travel throughout Europe. And for 99 times, probably even out of 100, I'd be like, why is he including this? But maybe you're applying for some sort of like, European coordinator position that's going to require extensive travel. So pointing out that you already travel there quite a bit helps show the employer, hey, the area. You might be a better quality candidate than someone like me that's never been to Europe. All right. So we talked about this. You can put in hobbies if they relate to the work, cultural activities you're involved in if they relate to. Again, there's a whole lot of stuff here. It's like, as long as you think it makes you look like the best possible applicant. Speaking of making sure you look like the best possible applicant, They say, hey, avoid saying anything that might be controversial or dangerous. Don't tell them about, they point out in the book, don't tell them about your political affiliations or beliefs or campaigns you might have helped with or something like that. But also don't tell them that you like to go skydiving on the weekends. You can talk yourself out of a job on your resume if, like, this guy's going to get himself killed the next year. I don't want to do the hiring process all over again. Let's choose a safer candidate. Okay. It points out here, I honestly would tell you not to include information about your family full stop, but the book says if you do include that information, emphasize that you're willing to relocate. And the reason I say don't bring it up, and the reason they say emphasize you're willing to relocate if you bring it up, is a lot of people assume that, like, an area guy like me, I'm a family guy, not just because I kind of look like them, but I am also what do you call it, like, very devoted to my family. So if I mention in a job application, yes, I'm very close to my wife and son, right? They might be like, oh, he's not going to want to move out to the West Coast for this job, versus what do you call it? If I say, hey, I'm definitely willing to relocate. I still think you should leave it out entirely. All right. Speaking of that, she just tried to call me. So I'm saying, hey, recording. What's up? Almost certainly asking if I want them to grab anything for dinner. Okay, so we got that. References. So for that, you can give references with address and phone numbers. They mention references available upon request. I personally like to go with the references available upon request kind of thing, because it's like, hey, I can chase the what do you call it? I can chase down each reference later if I need to. Like, hey, I haven't thought about what do you call it? Like, hey, this person would be the best. Basically, I'm speaking a lot of words to say this helps you customize references, right? Where it's like, hey, just like you can tailor, what do you call it? You can tailor your, oh, I'm emphasizing these experiences for this job, and I'm going to, emphasize these other experiences for this other job. It allows you to tailor the references. Plus, I guess it depends on the jobs you're applying for. I personally, my limited experience, I've increasingly encountered people that, like, they're just not that militant about it. Like, it's one thing if you have a reference like, hey, Jeremy in accounting can vouch for me. They might be interested in that, like someone we already know and trust likes this guy. But the traditional thing of, hey, they want to call up your high school, your church youth pastor to verify you're a good person or something like that. What do you call it? I personally haven't encountered that. Anyways, you can tell us available on Chris, or you can go ahead and give it to you. But you do want to make sure if you say references available upon request, you better have some people lined up if this place comes calling, because that does look pretty shady, right? The idea of, hey, yeah, I was what do you call it? Someone contacts you for references on a Monday and you can't get it to them until a Friday. It looks bad. It's like the references were not in fact available upon request. Okay. Let's see. They do mention on here at the bottom of your resume, insert a date line, the month and year in which you completed the resume. All right. So towards the bottom of 344, they describe a different kind of resume, which is the what do you call it? The functional resume. And so this is what do you call it? A functional resume is, God, now my son is sending me demented memes. Anyways, functional resume is like, hey, instead of doing this in chronological order, I'm going to put this in the order of what I consider the most relevant things. So this allows you to basically cherry pick a little bit, and because the one of the big downsides, if you call it that, of a chronological resume is you might have done something 5 years ago that makes you perfect for this current role, or 10 years ago even. And what do you call it? But if it's buried under a lot of other stuff, they might not really notice it. Versus in a functional resume, it's like, all right, I'm going to make sure these top 3 things or whatever, these top 3 job experiences that make me an ideal candidate are the first 3 that they see. All right. So once again, as with everything, what do you call it? As with everything else, you want to use the keywords where it's like, what do you call it? The AI thing might screen it. So basically, if the let's say the job opening said something like, "We are looking for a motivated self-starter who knows how to innovate within existing industries," or something like that. Corporate problem is what it is. But selectively putting that kind of stuff into your resume, into your cover letter, it's great because one, it can get you in the door because it gets you past the AI screening, as we've been talking about, but also like any actual human beings that sit down and review your application might be like, oh, hey, he's already speaking the language. I think we talked about that in the previous video. It's easier said than done, but you're basically like, I'm going to act like I already have the job and talk like I already have the job before I'm even hired. And I know that sounds paradoxical or just plain weird, but it's infinitely better than going in just like hat in hand and looking nervous. I hate to say it, guys. Hiring managers can smell desperation. They can smell it through a Zoom screen, even. So just be mindful of that. All right. So they have a thing on here. Obviously, you want to make sure that your address is on there. Make sure your phone number, other contact info is on there. And then they have a thing. I think we joked about it before. My least favorite part of any kind of resume or job application, like, hey, what is your job objective? Some resumes, like if you do use a template online, some of them have that just built in. Like, you better put a purpose here, and it always kind of puts you behind the eight ball of like, what is your purpose of getting this job? Gee, I'd like some money. Thanks very much. It's kind of like Charlie, his a little letter in that episode, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, like, money me now. But you can't really tell them that. So you can give a basic description of what you'd like to do in the industry you're interested in. The book gives you an example: operate and manage computer security for a medical insurance corporation. But honestly, like, you don't really have to do that. That's another, again, my experiences are limited, but I feel like the what is your objective on a resume is kind of going out of style in my always humble experiences. All right. And then this may go without saying, but I'll say it anyway because it's my whole deal. On the top of 347, they point out that functional resume, just like you did with your like, I'm going to bring in selected job experiences that help illustrate what a great candidate I'm also going to rearrange some of the other stuff, like when it comes to my schooling. Maybe I'm going to emphasize I went to this specialized academy for 1 year that is perfect for what we're talking about now. I'm going to maybe pay more attention to special honors and achievements that show I stand out as a relevant candidate, all of that fun stuff here. And then let's see. To develop your functional resume, it says take time for some brainstorming. Basically, it's how to put it. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but a chronological resume, you just kind of go right in. Here's what I did in the reverse order that I did it. There's only so much room, to expand. Here, it's a little more like, all right, what am I going to tell them? And what order am I going to tell it to them? What am I going to emphasize that shows them, oh, yes, he is in fact the candidate that we have been looking for. All right. So y'all probably know this by now, but they do have examples of different kinds of resumes in here. And I don't know if you're sick of this section yet. I'm probably going to have one more video that kind of wraps up this particular, section, but I wanted to have this be a separate resume video because it's tied so intimately to the resume assignment that we're working on for our final major project. Speaking of that project, if you have any questions about it or about anything else, as always, feel free to email me. Feel free to text me at 863-835-2399. Y'all have a good one. Bye.